Have you ever had that chilling moment when someone says something that makes your entire body tense up? That split second where your instincts scream that something is deeply wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on why. Carl Jung, one of history's most profound psychologists, understood that our unconscious mind often recognizes danger before our conscious mind can articulate it. He spent decades mapping the hidden patterns of human behavior, especially the shadows we all carry. Today, we're diving into 4 seemingly innocent phrases that Jung's work helps us identify as psychological red flags. Words that, when spoken by someone in your life, may reveal dangerous patterns hiding beneath the surface. This isn't about villainizing anyone. It's about recognizing when someone's words reveal unintegrated shadows that could harm you both. I want to be transparent from the start. Carl Jung didn't create a literal checklist titled "Things to Run From." What he did give us was something far more valuable, a framework to understand the human psyche and recognize when someone's words reveal deeper issues that could lead to manipulation, control, or emotional harm. In the next 20 minutes, we'll explore 4 statements that, according to Jungian psychology, might indicate someone hasn't done the inner work necessary for a healthy relationship. We'll examine why these phrases are problematic, what psychological mechanisms drive them, and most importantly, what healthy alternatives look like. Whether you're in a new relationship, reconsidering an existing one, or simply interested in understanding human behavior more deeply, this exploration of language through a Jungian lens might just change how you hear the words spoken to you. Let's start by understanding the psychological foundation Jung gave us, concepts that will help make sense of why these 4 statements are so problematic. You're overreacting. You're being too sensitive. It's not that big a deal. 3 different phrases, but they all send the same message. Your emotional experience is invalid. When someone consistently dismisses your emotions this way, they're not just disagreeing with you, they're attempting to override your psychological reality. In Jungian terms, this is a profound violation of your individuation process, your journey toward becoming a whole, integrated self. According to Jung, we all have aspects of ourselves that we've rejected or denied, what he called the shadow. When someone can't tolerate certain emotions in themselves, they often project this discomfort outward, attempting to suppress these same emotions in others. The man who tells you you're overreacting is often one who hasn't reconciled with his own emotional nature. Jung wrote extensively about how men in particular may repress their anima, their inner feminine aspect, which includes emotional sensitivity and expressiveness. By dismissing your feelings, he's actually fighting an internal battle with parts of himself he hasn't accepted. Consider this scenario. You express hurt when your partner forgets an important date. Instead of acknowledging your disappointment, he responds with, "You're making too big a deal out of this. It's just a date." In that moment, several things are happening. First, he's establishing himself as the arbiter of appropriate emotional responses, positioning his perspective as objective truth, while framing yours as distortion. Second, he's avoiding responsibility for how his actions affected you. Third, and most insidiously, he's training you to doubt your own perceptions, what psychologists now call gaslighting, though Jung would recognize it as an attack on your psychological sovereignty. What makes this pattern so destructive is its cumulative effect. Jung understood that our psyche requires validation of our subjective experience to develop healthily. When our emotions are consistently invalidated, we begin to lose trust in our own perceptions. Over time, you might find yourself thinking, "Maybe I am too sensitive," or "Perhaps I shouldn't feel this way." This self-doubt creates a psychological dependency on the other person to define your reality, exactly what Jung warned against when he emphasized the importance of individuation. This dismissal rarely happens in isolation. Look for related behaviors. Does he only dismiss emotions that are inconvenient for him? Does he express his own emotions freely while restricting yours? Do you find yourself apologizing for having feelings? Have you started hiding your emotions to avoid being labeled dramatic? If you recognize these patterns, you're experiencing what Jung would call an obstacle to authentic selfhood. What would Jung consider a healthy response instead? A psychologically mature individual acknowledges that all emotions carry meaning and purpose, even when uncomfortable. A healthier response might sound like, "I see you're upset. I want to understand why this matters so much to you. I didn't realize this would affect you this way. Can you help me understand? Your feelings are valid, even if my experience was different." These responses honor the subjective nature of emotional experience that Jung emphasized as crucial to human development. Jung believed that true connection happens when we allow others their full humanity, including their emotional truth. When someone consistently tells you you're overreacting, they're revealing their own inability to integrate aspects of human experience. This isn't just annoying, it's a fundamental impediment to both your psychological well-being and the possibility of genuine intimacy. Now let's move on to our second red flag, which reveals another way unintegrated shadows can manifest in relationship dynamics. If you loved me, you would stay home tonight instead of seeing your friends. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't question me about this. Someone who truly loves me would understand without me having to explain. These statements might seem like expressions of need or desire, but through a Jungian lens, they reveal something far more concerning: the weaponization of love as a tool for control. Jung understood love not as a bargaining chip, but as a transformative force that supports individuation, our journey towards psychological wholeness. When someone attaches conditions to love, they're distorting what Jung would recognize as the anima or animus archetypes, our internal images of the ideal partner. In healthy development, these archetypes evolve from primitive, controlling expectations into mature recognition of the other as a complete individual. The person who says, "If you loved me, you would," is often operating from an undeveloped archetypal understanding, seeing love not as mutual growth, but as compliance. This phrase functions as what Jung would call an unconscious power maneuver. By framing their request as a test of love, rather than a straightforward desire, the speaker creates a double bind. If you comply, you reinforce the pattern that your love is something to be proven through specific actions. If you refuse, you're positioned as the one who's failed the relationship, not the one making unreasonable demands. This is particularly insidious because it leverages your attachment and desire for connection against your individual boundaries and needs. The pattern in action: imagine this scenario. Your partner says, "If you loved me, you would let me look through your phone whenever I want." On the surface, they might frame this as seeking reassurance, but Jung would identify this as a manifestation of the shadow, specifically unaddressed insecurity and possessiveness that hasn't been consciously integrated. Rather than owning these feelings with a statement like "I feel insecure and would appreciate reassurance," they project the responsibility onto you by making their feelings your problem to solve, by sacrificing your privacy. The "if you loved me" statement rarely exists in isolation. It's typically part of a larger pattern where love is consistently treated as conditional rather than foundational. Jung would point out that this pattern often stems from early attachment wounds, experiences where love was indeed conditional, leading to a damaged understanding of what love actually is. The person using this phrase is often caught in what Jung called a complex, an emotionally charged pattern of behavior rooted in earlier life experiences. They're not just making a request, they're acting out an unresolved psychological drama. What makes this pattern particularly destructive is its progressive nature. With each successful application of this tactic, three things happen. First, your boundaries become increasingly permeable, what Jung would see as a dangerous blurring of the self. Second, the requests often escalate in their intrusion on your autonomy. Third, and perhaps most damaging, you begin internalizing the belief that love is something you must continually earn through sacrifice, rather than something you inherently deserve. This conditional framing rarely stands alone. Watch for related indicators. Do many requests come framed as tests of your devotion? Is proof of love demanded specifically when you express a boundary? Do you feel you're constantly proving your commitment? Has the definition of what someone who loves me would do expanded over time? Do you find yourself using the same phrase to justify your own needs? If you recognize these patterns, you're experiencing what Jung would call a power complex in action, a relationship dynamic where love has become transactional rather than transformative. What would Jung consider a more psychologically integrated approach? A mature individual expresses their needs directly. I'm feeling insecure tonight and would appreciate if you stayed home with me. I need some reassurance about our relationship. I'm feeling vulnerable and could use your support in this specific way. These statements own the feeling, make a clear request, and most importantly, they leave room for both yes and no without weaponizing the relationship itself. Jung believed that true love fosters individuation, the becoming of one's complete self. When someone consistently frames love as conditional on specific behaviors, they're revealing a fundamental misunderstanding of what love is. This isn't just manipulation, it's a roadblock to the mutual growth that Jung saw as the highest purpose of intimate relationships. As we move to our third red flag, we'll explore another way that unintegrated shadows can manifest in relationship dynamics. No one else would tolerate you the way I do. Who else would want you with all your problems? You're lucky I'm willing to deal with you. These statements might be presented as tough love or even as expressions of devotion, but through a Jungian lens, they reveal something far more disturbing, an attempt to sever your connections to the collective unconscious, to your sense of belonging in the world beyond this relationship. Jung understood humans as fundamentally social beings. He believed our psyche exists in relation not just to our personal unconscious, but to what he called the collective unconscious, the shared archetypal patterns that connect us to humanity as a whole. When someone tells you no one else would put up with you, they're not simply making a claim about your likability. They're attempting to disrupt your psychological connection to the collective, to isolate you from the broader human community that Jung saw as essential to psychological health. This phrase activates what Jung would identify as the archetypal fear of exile, the primal terror of being cast out from the tribe. Throughout human history, social exclusion often meant death. That ancient fear lives in our collective unconscious and can be weaponized to create unhealthy dependency. The person who says no one else would put up with you is often projecting their own shadow, their own fear of abandonment or rejection, onto you. Rather than facing their insecurity, they transfer it by positioning themselves as your sole refuge in a world that supposedly rejects you. Jung described what he called participation mystique, a blurring of psychological boundaries between people. This statement attempts to create an unhealthy form of this phenomenon by establishing a false dichotomy: either stay in this relationship, no matter how unhealthy, or face complete abandonment and isolation. This creates what modern psychologists call a trauma bond, a powerful attachment based not on love, but on manufactured dependency and fear. Consider this scenario. You express legitimate concern about how your partner spoke to you during a disagreement. Instead of addressing your concern, they respond, "You're so sensitive, nobody else would tolerate your constant complaints the way I do." In that moment, something profound happens. The actual issue, their behavior, disappears, replaced by a much larger threat, the specter of complete rejection by others. Jung would recognize this as a classic deflection technique, where your legitimate grievance becomes reframed as evidence of your supposed unlovability, rather than evidence of their mistreatment. What makes this phrase particularly dangerous is how it attacks the core of what Jung called the self, the organizing center of our entire personality. By suggesting that you are fundamentally unacceptable to others, this statement attempts to make your very identity contingent on the relationship. Over time, this creates what Jung would recognize as a profound disruption in your individuation process, your journey toward becoming a whole, authentic person. This statement rarely exists in isolation. In Jungian terms, it typically indicates a pattern of increasing control through isolation. First, subtle criticisms about your relationships with others, then more direct interference with outside connections. Finally, statements that position the relationship as your only possible harbor. The end goal, whether conscious or not, is to make the cost of leaving seem impossibly high by convincing you that there is nowhere else to go. This isolation tactic rarely stands alone. Look for these related indicators. Are your flaws frequently framed as uniquely unbearable to others? Do they position themselves as exceptionally tolerant for putting up with you? Have they subtly or overtly criticized your other relationships? Do they seem threatened when you receive positive attention or affirmation from others? Has your social circle narrowed since being with this person? If you recognize these patterns, you may be experiencing what Jung would identify as an attempt to create unhealthy psychological dependence by disrupting your connection to the broader human community. The most important thing to understand is that this statement is fundamentally untrue. In Jungian terms, it contradicts the reality of the collective unconscious, the shared humanity that connects us all. The truth is that human connection exists on a spectrum. Different relationships honor different aspects of who we are. No single person can or should tolerate all of you, because you aren't something to be tolerated. You're a complex being with both shadow and light, like every human who has ever existed. What would Jung consider a healthier approach to relationship difficulties? A psychologically mature individual acknowledges the reality of relationship challenges without attacking your fundamental worth. I'm struggling with this aspect of our interaction. We might need to find better ways to communicate about these issues. I value our relationship, but this particular pattern is difficult for me. These statements address specific behaviors or patterns without attacking your inherent acceptability to others. Jung believed that healthy relationships enhance rather than restrict our connection to the collective unconscious, to the broader human community. When someone tells you no one else would put up with you, they're revealing a profound misunderstanding of what relationships are for. This isn't just an unkind statement, it's an attempt to disrupt your most fundamental sense of belonging in the world. And that sense of belonging is your birthright as a human being. Now, let's examine our final red flag, which reveals yet another way unintegrated shadows can manifest in relationship dynamics. Have you ever heard someone say, I'm the only one who truly understands you. Those words might sound romantic in movies, but in real relationships they often signal something more insidious: false intimacy. From a Jungian psychological perspective, this claim represents false individuation. Carl Jung believed that healthy psychological development involves becoming a whole, differentiated self, a process he called individuation. When someone positions themselves as your exclusive interpreter, they substitute themselves for your own inner wisdom, position themselves between you and your unconscious, claim privileged access to parts of yourself that even you don't understand. As Jung might say, they're not helping you integrate your shadow, they're appointing themselves as the sole translator of your psyche. This creates an unhealthy dependency where you need them to access your own self-understanding. This red flag connects directly to what Jung called the savior archetype. The person casts themselves as your rescuer from a world that misunderstands you. Notice the narrative they create. Others don't see your special qualities like I do. No one else appreciates your true depth. Only I can recognize your real value. This savior positioning establishes a power imbalance where your emotional wellness depends on their presence. They alone can save you from the isolation of being misunderstood. The statement, "I'm the only one who truly understands you," creates unhealthy attachment through isolation. Let's break down how this works. First, it subtly invalidates your other relationships. Second, it creates fear that losing this person means losing all understanding. Third, it establishes that disagreement equals misunderstanding. Finally, it ties your self-worth to their validation. Over time, you may find yourself withdrawing from other relationships, believing they can't possibly understand you the way this person does. So how do we distinguish between genuine understanding and manipulative claims? Genuine understanding acknowledges its own limitations, encourages multiple perspectives, evolves through ongoing dialogue, empowers your self-knowledge. Manipulative claims assert exclusive access to your inner world, use understanding as control, create isolation from other perspectives, frame questioning as proof you're misunderstood. The difference is crucial: one builds your autonomy while the other dismantles it. Healthy understanding in relationships looks quite different from this red flag claim. Authentic connection is built on mutual curiosity without claims of complete knowledge, encouraging diverse relationships that nurture different parts of you, comfort with the inherent mystery between any two people, supporting your journey of self-discovery rather than claiming to guide it. The most profound relationships acknowledge that understanding is always partial, always evolving, and always shared among the various connections in your life. When someone tells you they're the only one who truly understands you, remember, true intimacy doesn't isolate, it connects. Real understanding doesn't claim exclusivity, it celebrates the complexity that makes you who you are. We've explored 4 powerful statements that often mask manipulation in relationships. Each phrase sounds innocent, even caring on the surface, but carries deeper psychological implications that can undermine authentic connection. Let's briefly revisit these red flags. Red flag 1, you're overreacting. This dismissal of emotions invalidates your lived experience and creates self-doubt about your perceptions. It's gaslighting at its core. Red flag 2, if you loved me, you would. This weaponizes love through conditions, turning affection into a transaction while eroding boundaries and autonomy. Red flag 3, no one else would put up with you. This isolation tactic creates dependency by severing external connections and instilling fear that alternatives don't exist. Red flag 4. I'm the only one who truly understands you. This creates false intimacy through exclusive claims to understanding, blocking genuine individuation and fostering unhealthy attachment. From a Jungian perspective, healthy relationships foster individuation, the journey towards psychological wholeness. They don't constrain this process, but amplify it. True connection honors the mystery between two individuating beings, rather than creating dependency or fusion. Jung would recognize these red flags as attempts to interrupt natural psychological development by creating what he called identification, the opposite of healthy differentiation. When you hear these phrases, consider these practical steps. Pause and breathe. Create space between the statement and your response. Name the pattern. That statement dismisses my feelings rather than addressing them. Maintain boundaries. I need my emotions respected, even when you disagree. Seek perspective. Consult trusted friends or a professional outside the relationship. Trust your experience. Your perceptions and feelings are valid data points. This work requires self-awareness. Notice your own reactions. Where do you feel these statements in your body? What early experiences might make you vulnerable to these tactics? Understanding your own psychological landscape helps you respond from strength rather than woundedness. Remember, recognizing red flags isn't about labeling others as manipulative. It's about honoring your right to healthy connection. Relationships at their best are vehicles for mutual psychological development. They should expand rather than contract your sense of self. When both people commit to respecting each other's individuation journey, connection becomes not a limitation, but a catalyst for growth. In the words of Jung himself, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. If this message touched your heart, share it with someone who might need it too. And if you're open to receiving the signs, drop her in the comments to let the universe know. Don't forget to subscribe for more soul-deep messages like this, especially made for those of us in the second half of life, the half where meaning matters more than ever. May your relationships transform you toward wholeness, not dependency. Thank you.